What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. This is our prediction show where we are going to break down what we expect to see happen as the Hounds travel to Toyota Field to take on San Antonio FC. I am Mike Sparks. Joining me for this one is Justin Ashcraft. Justin, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. This is fun to be back in the midst of soccer season and all of that. But had a great week. Laura Ellen was in Pittsburgh all week actually,
Mm-hmm.
and so I was solo parenting this week, which has its adventures, but it was good and we had a good week, so can't complain too much.
Good. Good. Lots going on around the team. Back in the swing of things, we did a whole bunch of shows this week. Talked to our friend Harry out in San Antonio to get the scoop on that. Talked to Augie Williams. Josh's Dogs of War video dropped yesterday. So let's get into all of it. I think the biggest news of all is something that I think we kind of knew was coming, but the on again, off again saga of Kenny Forbes retiring. I don't want to take away from the fact that he's retiring at all or becoming a coach, but apparently there were a lot of reports that he was telling everybody that last season was going to be his last season. And then we saw him at the one preseason game at Highmark, and he was kind of like coaching the guys in warm up, but then he was also going in and playing. And so we sort of had some conversations with people around the club, and we're like, is he playing? Is he not playing? And they're like, as far as we know, he's still playing. And then, the news came out this week that he is officially retiring. I guess just initial thoughts before we sort of get into all of his stats and things like that, Justin.
Yeah, I think it's fun when a player like this, can be around for such a long time, especially on the USL level. Like, you just don't see players stick with a club for that long. And obviously, Kenny and Bob have a great relationship and they've been together a long time and they were, Rochester and all that. But it's fun to have kind of a club legend in the modern day era. We've had Kevin Kerr and things like that, and players that have stuck around for a good portion of time. But it's fun to have a guy who's, been around and plays well and, means a lot to the community and has invested in the community and all that. So, sad to see him go, but also, he is getting older and our bodies don't work the same way as we get
Yeah.
older. And so I can understand the need to, hey, I don't think I can keep playing these 30 game seasons. But I'm excited that he's staying around the club. I think that's a huge benefit to the club, to the players, to just everything that happens around the Riverhounds.
Yeah, for sure. It was fun. I talked to Augie Williams the day that it was announced. And he was like, man, like I didn't even get to play with him. Like I played against him all these years, and I was excited to come to Pittsburgh and play with him. And he's like, I think he's hanging it up too early. Like I think he's still got it in him. So, it is what it is. Forbes retires as the all-time record holder in the USL Championship for regular season assists, matches played, and minutes played. As you mentioned, he did that with Rochester and the Hounds. He was also named first or second team all league 7 times in his career. The good news is that this sort of tees up a nice little send off for him at the Hounds home opener Saturday, March 22nd at 7 p.m. against Hartford. There will be a pre-match ceremony to honor his legacy. A bunch of the players were sharing out thoughts on Instagram and saying things like, hang his jersey in the rafters and all of that, which I don't know what the equivalent is in soccer. Like maybe they'll frame his kit and hang it somewhere in Highmark. But to your point, it is good that he's still going to be sticking around the club. He's still going to be coaching. And like I said, when we saw him in that preseason match, he's running the warm-up like a coach. So like he has that mentality. It will be interesting to see, once how many of the various coaching licenses he's sort of progressed through to this point. Where is he in terms of how he fits in with Bob's staff? But we're hoping to get some more information about that over the coming week and potentially talk to Kenny and sort of get his thoughts and see where he stands on it. But massive kudos to him. Obviously, an outstanding career. But like you said, I'm very much happy that he is sticking around the club as well. So big news there. A couple of other small points. Eric Dick was up for save of the week. It looks like he may lose to Nico Campuzano, who plays for Monterey Bay. In his save against San Antonio, who we're going to talk about in a second. It was interesting to me that San Antonio had two players on the team of the week, the USL's team of the week, Pacheco, who scored their game winner, and then Mitchell Tainer made their bench. He's their center back who picked up a yellow in the 42nd minute. We're going to talk about it. It obviously means nothing. I know that like the players appreciate the accolades, but for San Antonio to have two players on the team of the week, and I'm interested to get your thoughts on what we saw with the Hounds. The Hounds to not even get a shout feels a little like, okay. I don't know. Your thoughts on sort of all of that news and anything else going on before we dive into the San Antonio stuff?
Yeah, I think it's. I think it's one of those things. That first week of awards is like, sometimes you're just going with the team that wins. It's like there's so many. I feel like when you look at kind of the first couple weeks of a season, there's so many draws that happen, and it's hard to. You should be able to give some accolades to players who played well, even if their team, drew. But also, like, I think that is hard. I think what's hard too is then you kind of have the preseason rankings that are fresh in your minds. You have the, all that kind of stuff. And the Hounds haven't been that well accoladed in the preseason. So, I'm sure there was not many people, I think there's a lot of people who are skeptical of the Hounds this year. And so, especially on the national level. So I don't really care that we didn't get any, shouts right now. I'd rather fly under the radar for a little bit. Before we start seeing ourselves in the top 5 of the power rankings again.
Yeah. I had to laugh because, literally the day after the final game, you have the USL putting out all over social media, like, here's your first week power rankings. And like, I commented, I was like, calm down, guys. Like it's week 1. And the number of people who liked that and like kept bumping it up all over social media. A lot of people share that sentiment where it's like, we get it. You have a sponsor, you need to do this, but it's week 1, guys. Like let's roll it back just a hair. I mentioned I did get a chance to talk to our buddy Harry out in San Antonio. If you've not heard the Insider episode, go check that out. He shared some thoughts on what he hopes to see in this game, at least from their standpoint, and what he's expecting. He does somewhat follow the Hounds, so he has some thoughts there. The one other interesting thing was, well, I guess 2 things. Talked to Augie, I mentioned on Thursday. We published out the pregame episode with him. He alluded to 2 things that I mentioned to you off air. One was it sounds like when the Hounds press, he kind of leads the press. So if he decides to press, that's the trigger for everyone else to press. So for those of you who are curious about how all of that works, maybe just keep your eye on Augie this game and like future games and just kind of see if Augie goes to chase down a ball, do we then see Mertz or Borghi or Garcia or whoever's playing in those attacking midfielder positions? Do they also press or not? Because sometimes that's the game within the game. And so that was just interesting that there's a little key there. And the other thing that Augie kept sort of alluding to was, first of all, I thought it was great. 100%, it sounds like he is a team player. He is in it for the team, all of that. But he alluded to there being another system or something different that the team is going to be trying to do this week against San Antonio compared to what they did last week. So it will be interesting to sort of see how all of this plays out. I guess before we start to talk about San Antonio and what they did this past week, do you have any thoughts on any of that stuff, Justin?
Yeah, I think it's good to hear that Augie kind of understands his role in the team. And I think by extension, I think probably everybody else does too.
Yeah.
Because I do think, the key behind the press is if somebody goes, everybody has to go. Like you can't have one person pressing. And I think that's where it disconnects and things fall apart and all of that. And so if Augie is going to press a center back, like somebody's got to be on the holding midfielder. Otherwise, it breaks down pretty quickly. And so as long as he understands that and everyone else understands that, then I feel like it's a really good system to keep running after. I really did. I won't talk about this too much until we get to the next thing, but I do really like the system that the Hounds played last week, and I feel like it's a pretty versatile system. Like you can play that system a little more defensively, you can play a little more attacking, you can play a little more pressing. You can like hold off at times, and um, it can take a little bit of different, shaping at times. And so I really liked it, and I feel like if he's talking about a different system, that's I think you could play a lot of different things out of that formation and out of that system. So it will be interesting to see how they come out this week.
Yeah. Let's talk about San Antonio. So they did get a win in their first game of the season. They beat Monterey Bay at home 1-0. I mentioned that Pacheco scored for them. A couple of notable names that Hounds fans will recognize. Juan Agudelo is over there. He spent a few years in Birmingham. We saw him, former U.S. international, played some MLS. Jake LaCava is there, who I believe played for Tampa for a little bit. I think Buckmaster is there as well, who I want to say played for Indy as a defender. So there's a number of Eastern Conference guys that are now making their way out to the West to play for San Antonio. They beat Monterey Bay. Neither of these teams made the playoffs last year. So I don't want to get too high on, San Antonio. It sounds like they haven't really made a ton of signings. Harry kind of alluded to the fact that he's not really thrilled about their keeper, and that it sounds like the team has like the keeper in waiting, or at least what fans are looking to, the keeper in waiting, who is a college player who graduates in the spring, and then he'll be joining the team. So I don't see that as necessarily a good sign for your team, that you're holding out your hopes for a college player in the spring, and you basically have Sanchez kind of just holding the spot for him until then. That's not great. But when you sort of look at the comparison between the two teams, again, it's one game, but I'm gonna put something up on screen for those watching. This is from the USL site comparing the two teams. The distribution, specifically between the two teams, that Justin, I want to get your thoughts on. We had almost 150 more successful passes than them. Our passing accuracy was over 80%. And then when you look at the successful dribbles, which is basically where you pick up the ball and you sort of carry past the player, the Hounds had 7 successful dribbles and San Antonio had 0. And so what all of this is telling me is, at least in this first game, the Hounds were far better and attempted to create successful passes, so distribute the ball around the team and move the ball quickly, but B, also sort of break the lines a little bit by dribbling past players and creating opportunities in space. So your thoughts on sort of the breaking lines and passing and just sort of all of that?
Yeah, I was really impressed last week with the Hounds. I think saying all of this, I'll couch it in. It was the first game of the season, so there is
Yeah.
like a little bit of um, this is not the best that the Hounds are going to look all season. But I thought for a first game of the season in a new system with a lot of new players, especially starting Garcia and Bourget, I think you kind of expect like, hey, this is going to look a little rough. This is going to look like, what are we doing? And to have an 80% passing, accuracy. But the thing for me was not only the dribbles, but the line breaking passes were
Mhm.
impressive to me. I think you guys on Sunday talked about, why am I blanking on the center back's name? Not Suber, but the other one.
Oh, Beto.
Um, yeah, Beto.
Yeah.
Some of his passes, Suber's passes as well. They were finding guys 20, 30 yards up the field.
Yeah.
It wasn't the little 10-yard, passes and all that kind of stuff. It was, hey, we're gonna create a little bit of space, and then we're gonna hit a pass 20 yards, up the field. And a lot of those passes were on the ground, where they're a little bit easier to control and turn and all of that kind of stuff. And so that really impressed me a lot as far as what they're trying to do, or what they seem like they're trying to do. And so I was really impressed with their passing, and I think all of that being said, and the dribbles and the line breaking passes, I cannot remember the last time the Hounds had a game, and we could go back and figure this out, but I don't remember the last time they had a game where we had an 80% pass accuracy.
Yeah.
It feels like last year we were in the mid 70s almost every game, or even low 70s. And I feel like if we're gonna be in the 80s, 80%, I think this season's gonna be a lot better than last season.
Well, and I think too, once you start getting a passing accuracy that's a substantial number, a larger number, that can be indicative of the fact that maybe you're making too many safe passes. But like you said, with the eye test, that's not the case. We were making a lot of line breaking passes and really trying to disrupt whatever it was that North Carolina was doing. So yeah, it's really interesting. There was one point during the game, I can't remember if we talked about this on Sunday, where you could hear Lily yelling to Beto to get the ball to Suber. And so we were like, well, that's interesting. Like, is are they trying to have Suber kind of be that focal point to make some of those passes out of the back? When Suber was brought in, we talked to him last year. I talked to him in the preseason. He envisions himself as a ball playing center back. And so we didn't see it a ton last year. We saw it a little bit. But fun fact, after week one, Sean Suber is leading the league with passes with 110 passes. So he made 110 passes in this last game, which is a little less than a third of all of the passes that San Antonio made last week. So Sean Suber alone passed the ball a little less than a third than the entire San Antonio team last week. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I think there's a key in that, in the system that we're playing now, that allows the center backs to be a high, like, have a lot of passes.
yeah,
And it's a lot of times what I felt like was happening last week was, DG or Walty was coming to the back, like finding the back line, and you'd see a pass from Beto to DG, but then DG was turning the other way and finding Suber. But then the space that DG just created by going back created a hole in the field, and then Suber was hitting a 30-yard ball to Mertz.
yeah,
And it's those little triangles that you're creating, that now you're creating space on the field, that you're pulling a defender here, and then you're allowing a lane where Suber can get the ball 20, 30 yards down the field, and not on a long, hopeful ball, but a direct, ball with some pace that a guy can trap and turn, and
yeah,
I think when you create that, that's how you move up the field. You make those little passes, and then you move 10 yards up the field, and then you make another set of those little passes, and then you move 10 yards up the field, and all of a sudden your center backs are standing at midfield, and you've got the whole half of the field in front of you. And I think that's where I think the Hounds can be real dangerous by pinching some teams in, and making them feel the pressure of, and then the other thing with that on the other end of the field is your press doesn't have to run as far. If your press is
right.
only running 10 yards onto a center back, because you've got the team pinched in at midfield, and not having to press 20 or 30 yards at a time, like, that's, again, you make the field a lot more compact. Um, but then you create these lanes where you can pass the ball. So it's all really good. It's all really good stuff, and I hope to see the Hounds continue to develop in that.
Yeah, agreed. I genuinely, after seeing the game last week, I am legitimately excited about the prospects of this team. It sounds like all of the things that Bob and the players were saying that they were missing last year, they seem to have fixed it. It's the possession, it's the passing, it's the moving as a unit, so that you're not leaving guys stranded far up the field trying to make some magic happen all on their own. It just feels like they've figured a lot of that stuff out, and so yeah, it'll be really excited. What are you hoping to see from the Hounds this week? And give me your starting 11. Do you change anything from the game against North Carolina?
No, I don't think you do. I think you've got to give you've got to give guys the ability to sync together. And so I think it would be nice to see pretty similar lineup and a pretty similar way of doing things, because that will help the chemistry and all of that kind of stuff. Then over the next couple of weeks, you change a player or two out at a time,
Yeah,
and you give guys the ability to sync up, at that point in time. I think what you know, I think what could be exciting, I don't know what Sample's status is for this week, but that could help a little bit, having
yeah,
having Brad back. But I think there's not really he's not a wide player, so there's not there's not really a spot on the field for him at the moment.
Yeah.
If you keep the same starting 11, but having him coming in the second half, then you're bringing a guy who has experience versus a lot of our substitutions last week weren't bad, but they were
Right.
guys who haven't had a ton of experience in this league either. And so having a guy like Brad on the bench would be super helpful.
Yeah, agreed. I agree with you. I think you probably keep things the same as your starting lineup. What was interesting was, there was all of this hype in the preseason, largely by us, about Charles All. I say largely by us, but we had Rob Vincent on, and he was hyping him up pretty much too. So he got in the second half last week and just sort of brought a lot of energy. And I wonder if we won't continue to see him be sort of this like super sub. One of the big things, that you're starting to see really across the world is this idea that, you have your starting 11, but you do have to play for 90 minutes. And so if you don't get in, you can still be extremely impactful off the bench. And your role could be literally a very successful, 60-minute sub that comes in, and that's how you impact the game. You might get a few goals, but that all contributes to, what the team is able to do. So it will be interesting to see if they continue to kind of use all in that space. Wait until the 60th minute where you're kind of beating on their defense a lot and the guys are getting a little leggy. Now you bring in somebody like All who can bring more energy to the midfield, which maybe springs some more guys. It will be interesting. Interesting for sure. The one other thing that Augie mentioned was that they kind of know that San Antonio likes to play a bit of a high line. And so that also has me salivating just a little bit, because that can often lead to a lot of long balls over the top, or attempts at long balls over the top, which could spring guys like Borgie or Augie to kind of run in behind. So if you have guys like Beto and Suber who aren't afraid to ping some of those long passes, we might have a lot of like quick break opportunities in a way that in previous games, or all preseason and in the game last week, there was a lot of talk about wanting to get a lot of bodies forward into the box at the same time. Whereas if you know that a team's playing a high line, you might get more of these one-on-one break chances to make something happen. And it will be interesting to sort of see how that all shakes out.
Yeah, I think kind of along the line that substitution line too. Like I mean, I'd really like to see Larson for more than 5 minutes this week.
Yeah.
And see, like, I think could be a really interesting partnership with him and Augie. Just with Augie having a little more pace, a little more quick movement, that sort of thing. If Larson can be the one to bring some of those long balls down, and flick them over the top or flick them around the corner, and have Augie kind of running off of them, that could be really interesting. But then also, I think, I don't remember exactly how many minutes Larson had last week. He was probably 7 or 8, but like it would be, it'd be interesting as center backs are tiring and feeling like they've been pressed all game and all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. You bring a big physical guy off the bench for 15 minutes and let him just wrestle them while they're already tired. It could be interesting too. So I think that's the other one that I probably would like to see happen, 5-10 minutes earlier this week.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. I told you, I don't necessarily think this one's going to be close. I think a lot of people are kind of thinking that, oh, okay, San Antonio got a win last week. The Hounds only got a draw. Let's see how this all plays out. Give me your score prediction, man. How are you feeling about this one?
Score prediction. The only thing that makes me a little bit nervous about this game is like San Antonio. I feel like San Antonio is like their season last year kind of mirrored ours. Like it was like, this is a good team who had a struggle season.
Mm-hmm.
And so you just mentioned like, they have LaCava, Tainer,
Agudelo,
they
yeah,
like
yeah,
they have players who are like, they're good. They're good players and they're experienced
yeah.
players. And so, I think, if there's questions with the keeper, that's a whole different issue. But I think
Right.
like you've got players who are experienced and can turn things around. And I think that's kind of what we're hopefully going to see with the Hounds this year. It's like they've got some experienced players. And last year, hopefully was a fluke in a lot of ways. So that makes me a little bit nervous for this game, but I also like have been really impressed. I was really impressed with the Hounds, and I thought they potentially deserved to win last week.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like the 1-1 result was fair. But like, they potentially deserve to win last week. So I do think if they can continue that development, play a little bit better this week than last week, then it's not it's not out of the realm to me to think that they come out of there with a 2-1 win.
Yeah, I agree. I could see this game almost becoming a foot race back and forth, which I know Lily would not love, but I think would actually favor us to a certain extent, just because our propensity to want to hold on to the ball, our propensity to want to dribble past players to create space and make things happen. I mean, if you have players that are sort of stepping up into the midfield, drawing a defender forward, that frees up space for Augie to run in behind. And now all of a sudden, if they're playing a high line, he's off to the races. So I'm expecting a really fun match. If this ends up being like a 0-0 draw, I'm gonna be questioning everything. Like, what just happened? But I think I said 3. You talked me into a 3-1 last week. I think I'm gonna say 3-1 this week. I think that there's a good chance that we try to shut down the defense and try to keep them off the board. So I could see a shutout, but I also feel like if it gets into a foot race, like a fluky-ish goal is going to happen similar to last week as well. So I'll go 3-1.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm like, a lot of this I'm waiting until we have a home game. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I hear what you're saying of like, oh, if we have a 0-0 draw, like I'm gonna question everything. I hear that. I also go, okay, we've had 2 games on the road. They haven't been particularly easy. Like getting to San Antonio is not a particularly easy trip,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. And so I think it's one of those things I'm like, let me see how they play next week at home and then I'll make a judgment.
Yeah, that's fair. The game is at 8:30 p.m. on ESPN Plus and Pittsburgh Sports Net. I don't believe that the Steel Army is having a watch party at the pitch, although it sounds like there are going to be people going down to the pitch to watch it. It is also St. Patrick's Day weekend, so you're going to have people that are enjoying themselves. So just enjoy yourself responsibly, obviously. Yeah, this will be a fun one. Right after the game, just like we did last week, we will put out our player ratings. We love the feedback and thoughts. People thought that, some of our numbers were a little too harsh. So that's fine. Good. Let us know. But that will all be over on Substack, mongols.substack.com. And if you subscribe over there, you'll just get it straight to your email. You don't have to worry about the going to the site or anything like that. But we do appreciate all the feedback. And then we will be back tomorrow with our reaction show to talk all about what happens. So I guess, Justin, any sort of closing thoughts before we get out of here?
Nope. Go Hounds.
Yeah, let's go Hounds. Thanks, everybody. We will be back with more Hounds and Riveters content for you very, very soon.